Area reservoirs starting to drop. I'm ABC 10 Chief Meteorologist Monica Woods out of the capital city of California in Sacramento. Now we're going to be diving into that, so to speak. Also, a lot of changes coming our way. As far as our major water supply and our reservoir conditions, we are starting to see them dropping right now. As far as the capacity, we're at about 80 to 85%, but you can see the historical average is still running above 100%. Even as we start to move our way southward here, you can see we're at about 80 to 95% full, but historical averages still looking quite good, especially for San Luis at over 200%. Our historical average. Our bar line is starting to drop. So Folsom Lake, we'll take this as an example. You can see it climbs during the snowmelt season. And then as we start to approach capacity, those releases continue to happen throughout the course of the summer months. And typically, we start to see that drop off. That being true as well from another big water year, 2016, 2017, pretty much following the same path here. With the snowmelt, we start to see those increases. And then as those releases happen during the dry part of our season, when many people actually need surface water, those reservoir levels tend to go down. And this would be true even in a dry year like last year, 2021-22. Folsom did pretty well. Some of those area reservoirs, though, a little bit lower, but you can see how we just start to drop off. So any year, this is pretty typical. It's even true for our biggest reservoir for Shasta, currently starting to drop. And they need to make capacity because we are starting to end our dry season and head into our wet season. This past wet year really proved beneficial to us, many of us digging out of drought. The only place that actually saw below average precipitation was Palm Springs. Everybody else, these are the departures from normal, about 7 to almost 12 inches ahead of what we normally have. Now that season is going to end on September 30th. That's going to be the end of our water year. The fall rain typically starts in October, late October through November, but 50% of our annual precipitation is heading our way December, January, and February. The peak snowpack comes roughly late March into early April. With climate change, things are shifting a little bit. Every year is really a variability in California, but the water highest demand you can see is right here, April through September. And that's why we're seeing those reservoir levels drop, because the water is necessary. We're not getting anything from Mother Nature right now. And this year in particular, water managers are really trying to do their best, given that we have a 95% of El Nino pattern continuing through the winter season. Now, it's not a 1-to-1 ratio where it's, oh, we're going to get a big El Nino year, and that means big precipitation for California. But traditionally, what has happened more times than not is we get a wetter than average pattern through Southern California. So that's actually some good news there. It'll take a little bit of the pressure from needing to really convey and transport all of that water through the state. Now, again, that's not a given, but it is something that we're continuing to follow. Right now, though, we are getting a little bit of rain where we normally don't really for much of the Central Valley during the summer months. But unfortunately, it's coming at the risk of thunderstorms, and that's going to elevate our fire danger for much of this week. Plus, we've got the August heat, so more drying of those fuels. The biggest risk of thunderstorms to start us off for the work week is going to be for the foothills, parts of Northern California. Southern California, not as much. But anytime we get lightning on all this dry fuel, it's going to bring us into the high risk range. And it's mainly because of the trigger abundant lightning on dry fuels, especially below 5,000 feet. Given that last year we had such big snowpack, and in fact, I was just up in the high country, there's still snow on some of those peaks. A lot of the very highest elevations aren't really seeing that big risk of some widespread big fires, but the lower elevations have had ample time to do some drying out. As far as getting ready for the risk of fire, a couple of things just to keep in mind, especially with everything that had just gone on in Lahaina. We are so aware of how that feels in the summer months, with many fires breaking out in the middle of the night and accelerated by winds and just not knowing where to go. So with media, obviously television and even radio, those can be resources to know what is coming, being prepared. Having your local emergency alerts ready on your phone and signed up with your county. Keep in mind, with these fires, many times, not only will you lose internet connection, but you'll lose cell phone connection. So a couple of those places, social media, websites, even local emergency alerts may not be enough. The other thing that officials suggest is a NOAA weather radio. That can be, and many times, life-saving if by chance the cell phone towers go out and electricity goes out. And also have those contacts ready. Family and friends, let them know where you are. Hey, there's some weather patterns that are developing that may not be really beneficial to us. So just be aware. Here's where I am. This is where I'm going. Preventing a spark. Basically, no fire is going to happen unless there's a spark. So mowing lawns, not dry grass or weeds. Also, metal blades plus rocks many times can start a fire. And then watch for dragging vehicle parts. We're still in that time of year where we have a lot of camping going on. Dragging vehicle parts, especially with chains, perhaps with a trailer behind you, can start that fire on the side of the road. A couple of things to keep handy, especially this point in the year. Survival needs would be a first aid kit, important documents, your to-go bag, and also remembering pets. Sometimes those facilities that are shelter facilities won't take pets. Just be aware of what you need or where you might be able to take your pets if need be. Always have all of their first aid kit handy as well. So our fire season has had a bit of a slow start. I will say this, so we've been doing some research and it does show that our peak north winds, which are typically when we see some of those bigger fires break out, don't really peak until about September into October. So we're just now heading into our peak wildfire season. We've had about 4,000 fires so far this year and over 100,000 acres burned. That's a little bit ahead of pace of last year. But last year in total, by the time the whole year ended, we had over 360,000 acres burned. Again, that just shows you that we had 100,000 acres burned at this point in the season. Last year, by the time this year ended, we had over 350,000 acres burned, showing that September, October, November can still have a lot of fire danger. We're still going to be in that likely wetter scenario, though, through about the middle of the month. And it's largely because of what we call this Rex blocking pattern. Low pressure system to the south, high pressure to the north, and it prevents that low from busting out of here. So we get those thunderstorms popping up for the foothills and the Sierra. We've seen those thunderstorms ripple on through. This was at Amador Pines. You can see just that quarter-size hail rolling on through. Thanks to Renee for submitting that photo into us. Those thunderstorms still coming through on our Sunday evening with a couple of lightning strikes. This is kind of quieted down here with the loss of the daytime heating. We still have a little bit, but the instability is starting to lighten up for the evening hours. But the repeated pattern will be in place. Plus, we have the cloud cover, and that's going to keep us warm overnight. We saw highs roughly at about 100 degrees today. And the cloud cover tonight is going to keep us warm. But it also means the last night of the peak for the Perseid meteor shower, not the greatest visibility. Last night was great. Tonight, not so much with the cloud cover coming on through. Again, this is going to be a repeated pattern for us, primarily because of that setup that we have. So each afternoon, pretty much, we're looking at areas of showers and thunderstorms for parts of the foothills and the Sierra. The valley really starting to dry out right now. I want to go back to this Rex blocking pattern because, as I mentioned, we've got that high pressure ridge to the north of us. That is going to add in some stability for the valley. And that's about it, but it's also going to mean we got bigger heat, sinking warming air. So that's in place. In the background, we've got this low that's trying to add to the mix-up of our weather. But for the valley, it is all about the heat coming our way Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Tuesday and Wednesday is going to be the peak heat for us. Today, we reached highs in the 90s and 100s. Look at Redding, 112 this afternoon as we wrapped up this weekend. Bakersfield at 101. We saw some sprinkling of some 100s in there for parts of the rest of the valley, but that was generally giving you an idea of what kind of heat we're dealing with. Still in that moderate heat risk Sunday and Monday. Tuesday and Wednesday is when we jump into that major, and in some little pockets, we have extreme risk of heat coming our way. So heat safety tips, you always got to wear the sunscreen, take breaks in the shade, and stay hydrated. Now, this is going to be especially true, especially with so many people going back to school right now, taking breaks in the shade during recess or even getting out of school. Make sure you're in the shade as you wait for perhaps your carpool or the school bus, what have you. Overnight lows are also going to be warm. I mentioned that cloud cover that we're going to have overnight. That's basically like putting a blanket over us. And that daytime heat stays very close to the surface. It has no way to really escape, giving us a big jump start on our afternoon highs, but no break in that air conditioning. In the Central Valley, many of us have what we call whole house fans, where we can basically suck all of that warm air out. We have very low humidity. The air is dry. It cools off at night, in some places down to about the low 60s, despite the fact we hit near 100. And that allows us to open up the windows, use fans, the whole house fan that, like I said, just kind of sucks out all that warm air. But with the cloud cover and the warm temperatures overnight, many of us will be feeling a hit with our electricity bills. So if you're trying to get some cool weather savings, a couple of things to keep in mind. Use fans only when in a room. They cool people, not a room. Set your air conditioner to about 78 degrees if you can take it. I know that could be a little bit warm for some people sensitive to the heat. Close drapes and blinds during the day, and don't use big appliances in the evening. The rates go up at about 4 o'clock for many of us. So if you can avoid using those big appliances from, say, about 4 to 8 o'clock, that's going to save you some money as well. Our pets, we got to keep them in mind. Look at the air temperature, 95 degrees. That concrete gets up to about 145, at 105, about 155. 5-second rule, put the back of your hand on the ground. If it's too hot for you, it's too hot for the pets. And car temperatures on a hot day, you can see how quickly they warm up. Just 10 minutes in the car at 100 degrees, it gets to about 120. At 105, that temperature jumps up to about 125. I know with the onset of school, our routines are changing, and that can mean somebody or a pet might get left behind. Heat exhaustion and heat illnesses. Just looking at the signs, knowing when it jumps into a very severe level. Heat exhaustion, thirsty, dizzy, nausea. You've got cool, clammy skin, sweating a lot. Seek shade immediately. Now, when it jumps into the next point, that's heat stroke, that's a sign to call 911. Headache, no sweating, and red hot, dry skin. Somebody may actually be in severe distress at that point. So again, that's when we call 911. As far as our outlook for the next 5 days in the mountains, continued chance of thunderstorms. For the foothills, it's going to be muggy and warm with a mix of sun and clouds. And then for the coast, we're going to keep it in the 70s. And as you'll see with that 10-day forecast, the peak heat is on Tuesday and Wednesday. After that, we start to cool things down again, back to near 90.